I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, at Women's Hospital. At that time, not Women's Medical, at 42nd and Parish Streets in West Philadelphia. I was a resident until I married in the 4800 block of Fairmount Avenue, across the street from Salzburger Junior High School. I went to elementary school at 49th and Parish Streets.
What was the address where you grew up?
4805 Fairmount Avenue. My parents lived in that house until they made transition for over 65 years.
Now, were your parents native Philadelphians, or did they migrate up from the South?
My mother was from St. Augustine, Florida. My grandmother, my mother's mother, maternal grandmother, was Creole, and she was from Louisiana. My father was born and reared in Richmond, Virginia. They migrated to Philadelphia, they married, and I'm the youngest of 5 siblings. I just lost my eldest sibling May 6th of 2020 at the age of 98 years old, and she was in better physical condition than anyone that I knew. Her eyesight was good, her hearing, her mental capacity was extraordinary. She limped a little with the cane, but Beatrice was in excellent condition.
Now, not to put in, but what did your father do for a living?
My father was a steel laborer.
Where did he work in Philadelphia?
He worked at the Pennsylvania Forge, Milner and Bly Street. And then he got a contract and was able to work at the Philadelphia Navy Yard. My mother was a homemaker and a seamstress. My mother was an excellent seamstress. And I came from a family of stellar musicians. My elder sister was the organist and pianist of her church, Holy Cross Baptist Church. I'm Protestant. For over 45 years. I had a brother who played tenor saxophone. I had another sister who played the violin. The sister closest to me played the cello. And then my mother and father wanted me to take piano lessons, and at church I did study with 2 individuals who were musicians from our church, but subsequently I started taking classical music from Theodore Presser's School of Music, and at that time it was on Chestnut Street, and then they moved out to Ardmore. My mother wanted me to be a concert pianist, but I always wanted to sing. And my professor at Theodore Presser said to my mother, "You're wasting your money. This girl wants to sing." And the type of music that I wanted to sing, my mother said to them plainly, "I'm not going to have a saloon singer in my family." That's what they called them then, saloons and beer gardens. But that's what I did. I sang in my church choir. I was a contralto soloist. And I'm proud to say that I have been a member of the Penn Memorial Baptist Church since 1949. That is 72 years. Now remember, that's 72 years, but I'm only 38. So
Now I wanted to, following along the same line with your family, was your mother and father musical, and why did they want their kids to all study instruments and stuff?
I don't know. My mother couldn't sing her way out of a paper bag, and all my father could do was mumble. However, my mother had a sister who was an opera singer. And I don't know too much about their musical background, but at 13, my eldest sister was the pianist at the White Rock Baptist Church under the tutelage of a Mrs. Levinson and pastoral emphasis under a Dr. Williamson. And at that time, White Rock was located at 52nd and Arch Streets, and they had a horrific fire there. And subsequently, they moved to 53rd and Chestnut Street, which the Reverend Dr. William J. Shaw became the pastor for so many years, I think 50 years or something like that. And he retired. I don't know who the minister there is now. Penn Memorial had a fire in 1977, and they relocated to 54th and Winfield. They purchased Harzon, the Jewish synagogue there, and they are there now.
Now, I wanted to ask you, so what was the, did you hear a lot of music at home, like on the record player or on the radio? What kind of music were you listening to?
I listened to a lot of classical music because my mother wanted us to do that. We listened to hymns, gospel music, but I wasn't a doo-wop girl. I wasn't a doo-wop girl. R&B too, I listened to it, but I liked mellow music. I was very much into Duke Ellington, Benny Goodman, I would listen to the Count Basie Orchestra when I was young, a teenager. I became fascinated with the way he played the piano, the way they sound the horns. And I think my parents listened to that type of music. We liked gospel, but my mother wasn't a Pentecostal type gospel listener. We had nothing against it, but this was not what we did. The church that we belonged to was more reserved. We did anthems, and we had some stellar musicians who were the organists and pianists at Penn Memorial. We had first, when I could recall, we had W. Franklin Hoxter Jr., who was our organist. And then after that, the dynamic Mr. Alan J. Foster, who was our organist and choir director, minister of music for 40 years at Penn Memorial.
Now, when did you first start singing in the choir at church?
I was...
And how long did you do it?
Up until, well, you said when I first started. I first started singing when I was about 11 years old. I was in the children's choir. And of course, you modulate up. I was in the junior choir. And then I became a member of the young people's choir and subsequently the senior choir, which is now called the sanctuary choir. Up until I started having physical problems, and I took a hiatus for about 2 years. I had to have spinal surgery, which really sickled me down. And in 2015, I had to not resign, but sort of lay back.
That is a long time
Yes.
to be singing in the choir.
I loved it. I've always loved to sing.
Now, you talked a little bit about some of the musical training that you had when you were doing the piano. Did you have any other musical training, like in the church or singing or?
No, I never had any vocal training, but when I was in junior high school, I sang in the Glee Club, and unbeknown to me, McCoy Tyner was my neighbor and very dear friend. We met in the 7th grade, and McCoy played for the Glee Club a little. We had another young lady, Betty Burgess, who went on to higher career fame. She was the organist and pianist for the great Arthur Prysock for a while. I don't know whatever happened to her. But getting back to McCoy, first of all, McCoy was my first person that made me smile and made me twinkle my eyes and comb my hair every day. And in the 9th grade, we had a little combo. McCoy Tyner on piano, Garvin Massox played the congas, and Joe Kearney was our bassist. And this went on to high school. McCoy Tyner's mother was a beautician. Miss Beatrice was a beautician and had a shop at Fairmont Avenue and May Street. And in the back of her beauty shop, we would rehearse. But McCoy wasn't satisfied with what we were actually doing. He was on a different plane. He heard something different. And Richie Powell lived in the Trinity Apartments, which was located on 47th Street. And I think McCoy was like 17, 18 years old when he met Bud and Richie Powell. I don't know where Coltrane came out, but he and Richie Powell and Bud and were very, very dear friends. And Richie must have said something to Coltrane, and he brought Coltrane over to McCoy's mother's beauty shop when we were rehearsing, and McCoy took flight. And that was the end of the little combo that we had.
Now, what kind of music were you rehearsing?
Jazz.
Or like standards? Or?
Just standards. At that time, McCoy wasn't doing any writing. If he was writing, he was just doing the writing for himself. But we were doing the standards. The Andrews sisters, the McGuire sisters. Was her name Dorothy McGuire?
Yeah.
Dorothy, what she did, I listened to the Arthur Godfrey show, and we would get different types of music from that. Now, remember, I had records. I had 78s. Hidden in a suitcase because my mother was buying Chopin. Everyone else. I even had, and I think it was not destroyed in the fire that I had. I had a 78 of Carmen Cavallero, Joe Tito. Is it Joe Tito?
I think.
It was Tito. I used to go with my older girlfriend to the Palladium on Saturday night in New York. And Tito Puente Joe Loco, his name was.
Oh, okay.
Joe Loco. We would hear either Joe Loco or Tito Puente play. I liked Peggy Lee, loved her. June Christie, Ima Sumac, the Peruvian princess, because she had 7 octaves. When I got older, I heard this melodious voice with this woman, and I cherish her, Miss Sarah Vaughan, Miss Carmen McRae, Ella Fitzgerald. I wish I could have scat like Ella Fitzgerald. I loved, later on, Shirley Horn, Diana Krall. I used to listen to Mildred Anderson. I'm mixing them all up. I'm probably getting them in between, but these were the voices. As I said June Christie, Chris Connor, loved her. There
So
was,
you kind of were drawn to more of the understated
yes,
singers, Chris Connor and Peggy Lee and that sort of thing. So you were okay. Now, where did you buy your records?
there was a record shop on Chestnut Street or Market Street that I purchased most of my records from, or 69th Street, because by the time the record stores were King James and all of them, I was an adult in college then, before they started coming out in the neighborhood. So I did, and most of them geared to the genre of R&B, doo-wop, and that did not interest me. The only record that I had was Night Train. Everybody had Night Train. Jimmy Forrest, Night Train. But of course, he would have been much older than I, and my sister had that hidden in the suitcase where I had all my other records hidden under our bed. And of course, my mother discovered them. She didn't destroy them, but we weren't allowed to listen to them as often. Now, my mother was very shrewd. If she wanted something done, and even though our chores were spread out between my sister Hazel and I, because my other 2 sisters were adults and married. My brother was in the service, so Hazel and I were the only ones at home. And Hazel was the princess, and she was not feeling so well, or she had to do something. So then it fell on the baby sister, and then I just did it, and I was trying to be as shrewd as my mom. As a matter of fact, my mother gave me her name. I used to tease my mother because my sisters were much older than I and my brother, and I told her, you know, you taught me about the birds and the bees and the flowers and the trees and what I should do and what I shouldn't do, and yet you got caught because I was born on my mother's change of life. But anyhow, I thought I was as shrewd as my mother, and when my mother wanted something done, or she was going to do something, maybe she was going to change something in the house, or purchase something that she hadn't discussed with my father, and she would do it, and then of course my lips had to be zippered. And of course Hazel was the princess and she got whatever she wanted, so my mom didn't have to say anything to her, so I would bargain with my mother. I won't speak on it, if we can listen to our records.